Alrighty, well, hopefully there's sound this time. That should be fun. So, what we're going to do today is I'm just going to read the interview with Roger Stone from Tuesday, September 26, 2017. Oh, yeah, I should probably post this somewhere, shouldn't I? An easy way to share. That would be. There we go. Copy that. Perfect. Let's get everyone back here. Do that. So you're going to notice that I'm going to mostly focus on Roger Stone and Mr. Swallowwell. So that will stick out. Everyone else, apparently, I'm in a mood to do some sort of Southern thing. And if I don't know what's going on because something's just redacted, yeah, I'll let you know best I can. So without further ado, the executive session, Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, U.S. House of Representatives of Washington, D.C. Interview of Roger J. Stone Jr. Tuesday, September 26, 2017, in Washington, D.C. All them fancy folks in that thing. So the interview in the above matter was held in room HVC 304 in the Capitol, commencing at 9:41 a.m. Present Representatives Conway, King, Lobiondo, Rooney, Stewart, Gowdy, Hurd, Schiff, Himes, Spire, Quigley, Swalwell, Castro, and Heck. Pardon the language. And let's see. So appearances by for the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, big old blank. For Roger Stone Jr., we have Grant J. Smith, Esquire, Robert Bushel, Esquire, Strategy Smith, Bank of America, blah, blah. That's an address. Okie dokie. Page 3. So this is coming from blank. And golly, I couldn't tell you who it is. It maybe sounds like Schiff, maybe sounds like someone even dumber, but whatever. Anyway, blank is speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could begin, please. Good morning. This is a transcribed interview of Mr. Roger Stone. Thank you for speaking with us today. For the record, I am a big old blank for the majority of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. There are numerous other individuals in the room today, and they will identify themselves as they address you, Mr. Stone. Now, granted, I may be wrong, but I kind of maybe it is someone. I don't know. White hat, black hat. It's just blacked out. That's all I know. In my head, I'm thinking it's Schiff though. I just can't remember who was that guy. I just thought Schiff was in charge. I don't know. Anyway, before we begin, I wanted to state a few things for the record. The questioning will be conducted by members and staff. During the course of this interview, members and staff may ask questions during their allotted time period. Some questions may seem basic, but that is because we need to clearly establish facts and understand the situation. Please do not assume we know any facts that you have previously disclosed as a part of any other investigations or review. During the course of this interview, we will, of course, take any breaks that you desire. We ask that you give complete and fulsome replies to questions based on your best recollection. The interview will be conducted at an unclassified setting. If a question is unclear or you are uncertain in your response, please let us know. And if you do not know the answer to a question or cannot remember, simply say so. You are entitled to have lawyers present for this interview and see that you have brought them. And I see that you have brought them with you today. Counsel, if you would please identify yourselves for the record. Mr. Smith. My name is Grant Smith, attorney for Roger Stone. Mr. Bushel. My name is Robert Bushel or Berthgal. I just don't know. On behalf of Roger Stone, a big blank. Thank you. This interview will be transcribed. There is a reporter making a record of these proceedings so we can easily consult a written compilation of your answers. Because the reporter cannot record gestures, we ask that you answer verbally to all questions. If you forget to do this, you might be reminded to do so. You may also be asked to spell certain terms or unusual phrases. Consistent with the committee's rules of procedures, you and your counsel, if you wish, will have a reasonable opportunity to inspect the transcript of this interview in order to determine whether your answers were correctly transcribed. The transcript, will remain in the committee's custody. The committee also reserves the right to request your return for additional questions should the need arise. The process for this interview will be as follows. The minority will be given 45 minutes to ask questions, and then the majority will be given 45 minutes to ask questions. Immediately thereafter, if you wish, we will take a 5-minute break, after which the minority will give them 15 minutes to ask questions. The majority will be given 15 minutes to ask questions thereafter. We will continue in this process until the interview is complete. These timelines will be strictly adhered to by all sides, with no extensions being granted. Time will be kept for each portion of the interview, with warnings given at 5 and 1 minute marks, respectively. To ensure confidentiality, we ask that you do not discuss the interview with anyone other than your attorney. Our record today will reflect that you have not been compelled to appear. You are reminded that it is unlawful to deliberately provide false information to members of Congress or staff. Lastly, the record will reflect that you're appearing under oath. Mr. Stone, would you raise your hand to be sworn in? Mr. Stone, do you swear and affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Mr. Stone, I do. A big old blank. Thank you, sir. The witness has been sworn. Go ahead. And then blank. I just want to remind everyone that if you haven't left your electronics out front, please do so at this time. That includes Blackberries, iPhones, Androids, tablets, iPads, or e-readers, laptops, iPods, MP3 players, recording devices, cameras, wireless headsets, pagers, and any type of Bluetooth wristband or watch. Additionally, I am obligated to remind the witnesses that providing false information to this committee or concealing material information from this committee is a crime punishable by law. And Pickle Plank says thank you. Reminder to all, if you are speaking, please use the microphone and make sure it's turned on. Mr. Stone, before we get to your opening statements, over to the chairman. Blank, I have one statement. I'm blank for the majority. I just want to remind the witness that no recordings can take place in this room and that Rule 5 of the House Rules does not permit any recordings of this proceeding. Mr. Stone, I'm fully aware of that. Thank you. Big old blank says, Mr. Rooney, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rooney, Mr. Stone, welcome. And I have no idea what most of these people sound like. I'm really just focusing on Swallows and Stone. So just whatever I feel like for the other people. So Mr. Rooney says, Mr. Stone, welcome. I just want to say to the minority and to blank, if we could, because in the past I've sort of gotten the hairy eyeball from some members of the minority when I say that like their time is up. And you said in your opening that you're going to give 5 and 1 minute warnings. Could you please do that verbally, regardless of what's going on, so that I'm not the bad guy? I mean, like, Jackie, your time's up. You're not talking anymore. Sorry. I don't want to do that anymore. So, in lieu of self-control, blank says, yes, sir. Mr. Rooney, if you could be the bad guy from now on, I'd appreciate that. 5 and 1 minute warnings. I think that would be good. Yes, sir, says blank. Mr. Rooney, thank you. Mr. Conway. Mr. Stone, thank you for coming this morning. Typically, we'd just start with the questions, but I understand that you have a statement you'd like to make. Mr. Stone, I would, sir. Mr. Conway, under your committee rules, you have 5 minutes to say to us whatever you'd like to say. With that, you're recognized. Mr. Stone. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, members of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the staff. My name is Roger Stone. I am most interested in correcting a number of falsehoods, misstatements, and misimpressions regarding allegations of collusion between Donald Trump, Trump associates, the Trump campaign, and the Russian state. I view this as a political proceeding because a number of members of this committee have made what I consider to be irresponsible and indisputably and provably false statements in order to create the impression of collusion with the Russian state without any evidence that would hold up in a U.S. court of law or the court of public opinion. I am no stranger to the slash and burn aspects of American politics today. I recognize that because of my long reputation and experience as a partisan warrior, I am a suitable scapegoat for those who would seek to persuade the public that there were wicked international transgressions in the 2016 presidential election. I have a long history in this business. I strategize, I proselytize, I consult, I electioneer, I write, I advocate, I prognosticate. I'm a New York Times best-selling author. I'm an opinion journalist. I have a syndicated radio show and a weekly column. And I report for Infowars.com at 5 o'clock Eastern every day. While some may label me a dirty trickster, the members of this committee could not point to any tactic that is outside the accepted norms of what political strategists and consultants do today. I do not engage in any illegal activities on behalf of my clients or the causes in which I support. There is one trick that is not in my bag, and that is treason. My colleague, Michael Caputo, voluntarily sat in this chair a few months ago, gave what I believe were candid and truthful answers to those who cared to sit in on the interview. And yet, when he was done, he was accused of perjury by a member who did not even have the courtesy to show up for his interview. He was eviscerated by some committee members and then subsequently by the press. The most unfair aspect of this turn of events and behavior by some members is that the committee refuses to this day to release the transcripts of his testimony for the world to read and judge for themselves. Multiple members of this committee have made false allegations against me in public session in order to ensure that these charges get maximum media coverage. However, now you deny me the opportunity to respond to these very same charges in an open forum. This is cowardly. Fortunately, we will have the opportunity today to take the exact words of some members of the committee and examine them in order to uncover some lies. Given this committee's consistent refusal to allow me to testify in public session, in the interest of compromise, I have repeatedly requested that the transcript of my testimony here today be released immediately upon the conclusion of today's session. Even this constructive suggestion has been rejected. What is it you fear? Why do you oppose transparency? What is it you don't want the public to know? These hearings are largely based on a yet unproven allegation that the Russian state is responsible for the hacking of DNC and John Podesta and the transfer of that information to WikiLeaks. No member of this committee or the intelligence agencies can prove this assertion. Because the DNC steadfastly refused to allow the FBI to examine the computer servers, this entire claim is based on self-serving report by CloudStrike, a forensic IT company retained, directed, and paid for by the DNC. I recognize that there are those who believe that there was collusion between the Trump camp and the Russian state who now say, well, Stone must have been involved, but that is not based on a shred of evidence. There's nothing more than conjecture, supposition, projection, allegation, and coincidence, none of it proved by evidence or fact. I understand the committee's interest in me. I use all the clauses of the First Amendment to achieve my goals. I'm out there, I'm provocative, and unpartisan. But let's be clear. I have no involvement in the alleged activities that are within the publicly stated scope of the committee's investigation. That would be collusion with the Russian state to affect the outcome of the 2016 election. I have every right to express my views in the public square. I actively participate in matters of great public concern. The mantra like repetition of the claim by your vaunted 17 intelligence agencies that the Russians colluded with the Trump campaign to affect the 2016 election does not make it so. These are, after all, the same entities who insisted the North Koreans would not be able to launch a viable rocket for 3 to 5 years. They insisted that Saddam Hussein was in possession of weapons of mass destruction, that there was no torture at Abu Ghraib prison, and that the government had no bulk data collection program. That is until Edward Snowden revealed otherwise. Sadly, our intelligence agencies have been politicized. I realize they are deeply upset over President Trump's refusal to expand the proxy war in Syria and their failure to obtain the no fly zone promised to them by Hillary Clinton, which would, in my view, have been an open invitation to World War III. That the intelligence agencies have continued to leak to the detriment of President Trump in violation of law is proof positive of this politicization. Pick one. Members of this committee have made 3 basic assertions against me, which must be rebutted here today. The charge that I knew in advance about and predicted the hacking of Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta's emails, that I had advanced knowledge of the source or actual content of the WikiLeaks disclosures regarding Hillary Clinton, or that my now public exchange with the persona that our intelligence agencies claim but cannot prove is a Russian accent, is anything but innocuous and are entirely false. Again, these assertions are conjecture, supposition, projection, and allegations, but none of them are facts. For example, Mr. Schiff, the ranking member of the committee, asked, "Is it a coincidence that Roger Stone predicted that John Podesta would be a victim of a Russian hack and that his private emails would be published, and did so even before Mr. Podesta himself was fully aware that his private emails would be exposed?" I want to know where I predicted this because I never said anything of the kind. Could Mr. Schiff read us the exact quote and source where I predicted the hacking of Mr. Podesta? Can Mr. Schiff come up with a documented quote where I used Podesta and email in the same sentence before it happened? My tweet of August 21st, 2016, in which I said, "Trust me, it will soon be Podesta's time in the barrel, hashtag Crooked Hillary," must be examined in that context. I posted that at a time that my boyhood friend and colleague, Paul Manafort, had just resigned from the Trump campaign over allegations regarding his business activities in Ukraine. I thought it manifestly unfair that John Podesta not be held to the same standard. Note that my tweet of August 21st, 2016 makes no mention whatsoever of Mr. Podesta's emails, but does accurately predict that Podesta's brother's business activities in Russia with the oligarchs around Vladimir Putin, their uranium deal, their bank deal, their Gazprom deal, would come under public scrutiny. Mr. Conway: "Mr. Stone, you're at the 5-minute mark. Your full statement will be made a part of the record. And if there are closing comments you would like to make in the last, we all have it, the last 10 pages." Mr. Stone: "I am happy to answer your questions. The statement of Mr. Stone follows." Committee insert. That brings us to page 12. And this is where the fun begins. Mr. Conway: "All right, thank you, sir. With that, we'll turn to the minority." Oh no, Conway was the majority. Whoa, no. Does that mean he was the good guys? No. I guess he had a. I just can never tell what's talking when it's redacted. It's just so silly to do that if they're all here anyway. All right, thank you, sir. With that, we'll turn to the minority. Mr. Stone. I read as fast as I could. Mr. Schiff: "Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to yield to Mr. Swalwell." Here's the fun part. From now on, it's basically just a back and forth between Mr. Swallowswell and Mr. Stones to Mr. Swallowwell. It's going to sound very distinct. And Mr. Stone's pretty much just going to be a regular voice. Mr. Swallowwell: "Thank you. Good morning. Welcome, Mr. Stone." "Thank you. First, congratulations are in order. You have known Donald Trump for about 40 years. Is that right?" "That is correct. And going all the way back to 1988, your friend Donald Trump, you have encouraged to run for president." "That is correct." Wait a minute. Wasn't that something Q mentioned? Who? Yeah, I'm going all the way back to 1988. Your friend Donald Trump. Wow, this is a sentence. Friend Donald Trump, you have encouraged to run for president. Okay. Going all the way back to 1988. Your friend Donald Trump, you have. God, that's a terrible sentence. That is correct. And even in 2000, you said you had encouraged him to consider running for under the Reform Party. That is correct. And recently, as 2015, when he emerged as a likely candidate, you stayed in contact with your friend Donald Trump. I actually worked as a consultant to his brief exploratory examination of the race in 2012 and then again in 2015. And he listened to you in 2015 as you advised him before he made the decision. Is it fair to characterize it as you were one of the few people he would listen to? Sometimes. Yeah. He was somebody that trusted you. I believe that. I believe that's true. And you trusted him. Yes. And you were loyal to him. Yes. And he was loyal to you. Yes. And he devoted a lot of time in a documentary about you, Get Me Roger Stone, saying pretty nice and flattering things about your work. I don't know much about I don't know how much time he devoted, but he did say some nice and flattering things. And he won. Yes, he did. Mr. Stone, do you have any recording devices on you today? I do not. And Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith says no. And Mr. Bushel? Mr. Bushel says no. Mr. Stone, have you been interviewed by the Department of Justice or FBI with respect to your role in the 2016 campaign? I have not. Have you been asked to come in for an interview, or I have not scheduled an interview? I have not. And can we agree that the 47-page statement that you issued through WikiLeaks today is accurate? I didn't issue it through WikiLeaks. I gave it to the Associated Press. Were you aware that WikiLeaks published it this morning? I was not. Okay, but the 47-page statement that you have issued, we can agree that under oath, every word in it is accurate. I believe that to be the case. All right. Mr. Stone, with respect to Donald Trump, in the time that you have worked with him before the 2016 election, so we'll carve this up in pre-2016, post-2016. How much money had Mr. Donald Trump paid you for your services prior to the 2016 election? From the beginning of time? Yeah. I really have no way to estimate. I can tell you how much he paid me for my work pertaining to the 2016 election, which would actually have been in 2015. But prior to that, could you give us an estimate? Is it more than $100,000 or less than $100,000? It would be more than $100,000. I represented him or represented the Trump organization, or at one time Trump hotels and casino resorts, going back to 1981. So over that period of time, I would say probably several $100,000, but I could not put a precise number on it. Do you think that it was more than $1 million? No, definitely not. So somewhere between a couple $100,000 and $1 million. Yes. Okay. And had you founded a lobbying practice in 1980 with Paul Manafort, Black Manafort, and Stone? Is that correct? That is correct. And that lobbying practice had foreign clients. Is that correct? That is correct. Okay, which foreign clients did you have with respect to the Soviet Union? None that I'm aware of. How about Ukraine? None that I'm aware of. Have you ever had Ukrainian clients? I represented a splinter party in Ukraine long after Black Manafort and Stone had been sold. I think Black Manafort and Stone was sold to Burstyn Marsteller, or the parent company Young and Rubicam, in 1989. I worked in one cycle for the splinter party of Vladimir Litvin, pro-Western candidate who opposed Paul Manafort's candidate, Viktor Yanukovych, in the 2006-2007 parliamentary elections in Ukraine. Did you ever work with Paul Manafort on any Ukrainian campaigns where there were two of you, where the two of you were on the same side? No. Okay. You said that you were the father of the yard sign in Ukraine. Is that right? Yes. That was kind of a running joke. As you may know, American campaign technology is not widely known in Eastern Europe, and therefore putting a yard sign in your yard was a revelation to them. In the Ukrainian elections that you worked on, did you ever go with interact to receive money from any Russians who had interest in Ukrainian elections? No. Did you ever have contacts with Renat Akhmedchin? No, I don't know who that is. How about Oleg Deripaska? No. What was your role when you joined the Trump campaign in 2015? Just a general strategic consultant? And what were your responsibilities? to try to structure a campaign for the president of the United States. I had been through 9 previous presidential campaigns going back to Nixon, Reagan, Bush, Dole. Therefore, I had extensive experience in campaign structure. And you had been paid, at least in public records, $50,000 by the Trump campaign. Is that right? Over a 5-month period, yes. Okay, is there any other monies that came into you from the Trump campaign? No. When you're an advisor, how often would you interact during the 5-month period with Donald Trump? A couple times a week, 2, 3 times a week? And were these interactions by phone, in person, by email? Sometimes in person at Trump Tower, sometimes by phone. Okay, did you ever email with him? No. Ever communicate electronically at all with him? No, he doesn't use email. Would you ever email with somebody who needed to pass a message to him? No. Do you know Ronograph? Yes. Okay, so would you ever send a message to Rona and then she would send a message to Donald Trump and then you would get correspondence back from Rona? No. You could leave a phone message with her if you wanted to speak to him and he would call you back. Okay. It's possible that I emailed her along those lines, but I don't specifically recall. So during the 5-month period, when you said you spoke with the president a number of times, do you think it was more than 10 or less than 10 in person? Probably more than 10. Do you think it was more than 20 over a 5-month period? Yeah, probably. Okay. Do you think it was more than 50? Probably not. Okay. How about by phone? Very difficult to say. Okay. And can you give us the months so we're talking about the 5-month period in August 2015 when you first joined. Is that no? I actually left in August of 15. So if you counted 5 months back, that it would be March, April. Okay, so March to August 2015. Sounds about right. When you were working with the campaign, did you have any contacts at all with any officials from the Russian Federation? None whatsoever. How about Russian citizens? None whatsoever. People presented to you as Russians? None whatsoever. Now, having worked with Mr. Trump since at least 1981 in a business relationship where you were aware, or what was your knowledge of, were you aware, or what was your knowledge of Mr. Trump's business dealings or friendships with the Russians? I had no knowledge of, but I knew that he took the beauty pageant to Moscow. That would be the extent of it. So, other than the 2013 beauty pageant to Moscow, it would have been a complete surprise to you to learn that Mr. Trump and friends in Russia had friends in Russia and had sought to do business in Russia. I was unaware of that. Okay, did you ever see Mr. Trump interact in 2015 with any Russians? I did not. Did you ever hear of any people on the campaign talk about his interactions with any Russians? I did not. How about, I'm assuming you're familiar with Jared Kushner. Yes. And obviously your friend, Paul Manafort. Yes. Yes, although I should make it clear, I have met Mr. Kushner once in my life. When was that? It would have been in the period that I was working for Donald Trump, so sometime between April and August. He was leaving Donald's office when I was coming in, and we shook hands. Did you have an office? We've never had a substantive conversation. Did you have an office at Trump Tower? I did not. I did in 2000. I did not in 2015 when it would have been. So you left on August 10th, 2015. Is that right? Yes. Donald Trump said he fired you. Yes, he did. He said that he fired me. He said he wasn't using you anymore. Yes, he said that. He said that you were seeking media attention, and he didn't like that. Yes, he was unhappy that I had resigned the day before. Okay. So I presented a copy of my resignation letter to a reporter from both Politico and the New York Times to memorialize them. So we disagreed on that. Well, he made a statement that you were fired, and you're saying today that you resigned the day before that. That is correct. So Donald Trump was lying. That's a question you'd have to ask Mr. Trump. He may believe that he fired me. It became very clear to me that he would be his own strategist. Now, this is a campaign that never took a poll for the entire period of the nomination phase because he does not believe in them, at least doesn't believe in paying for them, and doesn't believe in utilizing them as a strategic tool. They interest him in the horse race aspect, but it was very clear that he had a model of the campaign in mind that revolved around the set piece rallies. That he believed that the cable news networks would give them wall-to-wall coverage. I was skeptical about that. But I just want to be clear. He was right. I was wrong. But there cannot be two strategies in a campaign. It was his name, his money, his future. He was entitled to do it his way. I resigned. And there also cannot be two versions of the truth. So your position is that the truth is you resigned. That is correct. So if his statement is that you were fired, then he's not telling the truth. Got him this time. Well, I don't know how my resignation was presented to him because he was on the road. I have no idea what Mr. Lewandowski or anyone else in the entourage may have told him, so it's impossible for me to say. Other than his insistence where he said you were fired and you said that you resigned, are you aware of any other times where Donald Trump has publicly not told the truth? No. With respect to your communications with other people on the campaign, how would you typically communicate with, say, Paul Manafort once he joined the campaign? Telephone. Okay. Mostly. How about text message? Occasionally. Okay. And do you use an iPhone? Yes. Okay. And would he use an iPhone? Don't know. What about any apps? Like WhatsApp or Viber or no? Telegram? No. Do you use any messaging apps? I do, but I never used them in that time period, and I never used them with Paul Manafort. We know that you use direct message on Twitter. Yes. Did you communicate with any campaign officials through direct messages on Twitter? Not that I know of. Tell me how Paul Manafort became campaign chairman. There came a period in the campaign where Donald Trump had lost the Wisconsin primary, had lost the Colorado caucuses, had lost the North Dakota caucuses. And in that same time period, even though he had swept the Louisiana primary, the delegates were taken from him in Louisiana under their party rules. The Trump campaign, not having at that point people who were experienced in nomination politics, had spent no attention, paid no attention to the appointments by each state chairman to the convention rules, credentials, and platform committee. As you probably know, both the Republican and Democratic national conventions are governed by excuse me for a second. Are governed not by federal law, not by state law, but by their own rules. There's a precedent in our party in 1952 when Senator Robert Taft arrived at Chicago with enough votes to be nominated. And then in the credentials, this has all been stoned, by the way. Sorry about that. And then in the credentials committee for that convention, the Texas and Louisiana delegates for Taft were unseated. They were replaced by Eisenhower delegates, and Eisenhower was nominated. Consequently, the nomination can be stolen from a candidate who has the majority of the delegates. So you brought Mr. Manafort, no? Recommended Mr. Manafort? Well, I was among those who recommended Mr. Manafort. Mr. Manafort. Who did you recommend Mr. Manafort to? Donald Trump. And what month was this? March 2016. When did Manafort join the campaign? I'm really uncertain. Does that sound about right, March? Sounds about right. And clearly in March 2016, if you're recommending Mr. Manafort and Mr. Trump puts him on the team, you're still quite influential. Mr. Trump is listening to you. Immediately upon resigning from the campaign, I did a number of surrogate speaking, media appearances, and so on, and I continued to advocate for the election of Donald Trump. He's been my friend for 40 years. I took no umbrage at the notion that he said I was fired, pretty much ignored it, and I worked as hard as I could to support him. I think that surprised him, but it held our relationship together. I would hear from him less after I'd resigned, but he did ask me point blank, can this nomination be stolen from me? And I said, yes, it can be. There's a precedent for that. He said, what should I do about it? I said, you need a convention manager. And he said, who could do that? I recommended Paul Manafort, who he knew and had met in the 1988 Republican National Convention while Manafort was running the floor operation for then Vice President Bush. Now, did you tell Mr. Trump about your knowledge of Mr. Manafort's ties to foreign political campaigns? No. Did Mr. Trump have knowledge that I don't know? And your knowledge included that he had worked for essentially pro-Russian Ukrainian political parties? He had worked for a Democratic political party in an election in Ukraine in which our State Department recognized the results. And I believe that activity to be entirely legal. And he also had close ties to business persons or oligarchs who were close with President Putin. Is that right? I was unaware of that. Had you known that, would you have found that disqualifying? At the time, no. Why not? Well, it would have been before the claim, which I believe was political, that the Russians had interfered in this election. Are you familiar with any of the following companies? Stonefel, Stonefel? No. Kingstone? No. Edmundstone, Andumstone? No. Sunstone? No. Can you just, Mr. Smith pops in, can you just read back the second one? Yes, Kingstone. Thank you. Would you ever text message with the president candidate Trump? No, I don't know that he even has text message function. What is your knowledge of Mr. Manafort's business dealings with the Russian oligarchs? Not what you read in the paper, but what you've observed personally. In your opening statement, you referenced that the DNC would not turn over its server to the FBI. I'm sorry. In your I skipped one. Now you're in the paper, but you've observed personally. I've observed nothing personally. I read about a business relationship with Oleg Deripaska. Prior to reading that, I had never heard of Mr. Deripaska. In your opening statement, you referenced that the DNC would not turn over its server to the FBI. Yes. That's frustrating to you. Dickhead. Well, I read the piece in The Nation last week in which a number of counterintelligence experts and veterans from our own services make the case that it was more than likely DNC material was stolen through a download of some kind, thumb drive or portable device, and that science tends to prove that theory as opposed to the hack. And they wouldn't not believe in science, would they? Science. You think they could have been more forthcoming? Yes, I think that would be fair to say. So, Mr. Stone, what is your Twitter password? My Twitter password? Yeah. I'm uncertain, to tell you the truth. Can we access your Twitter account? You can, sure. Okay, so you wouldn't have a problem if we wanted to follow up to review your direct messages and the history of your tweets and retweets. I'd like to review them before I allowed that, but okay. And Mr. Stone, are you aware that we have asked you to turn over your Twitter account to us to review not only your public tweets, but also to review your private direct messages? I don't know about that. That was Bichelle and then Stone. No, that's unfamiliar to me. Mr. Swallow. Okay, so it sounds like today, after reviewing them yourself, you're open to turning those over to us. Mr. Bichelle. There are private conversations that we would want to review. I don't think it's fair to say turn over all your communication, so we'd review your request. Sure. Mr. Stone. Thank you, and I appreciate that, Mr. Bichelle. If we were to send you a oh, no, never mind. I guess it's not him talking. Sure. Mr. Stone, thank you, and I appreciate that. Mr. Bichelle, if we were to send you a request asking for any direct messages with respect to the 2016 campaign, particularly around Gooch for 2.0 and WikiLeaks, you would be more cooperative and turn that over to us? Well, I attached the exchange with Goochifer as an exhibit, and you're welcome to look at it. Beyond that, we'd have to go review the material. I don't know what's there. In 2016, August of 2016, and the American public, in 2016, August of 2016, you and the American public are aware from press reporting that Russia is accused of hacking Democratic emails. Is that? Yes. And you're also aware that there are no other suspects out there, and that no other country or entity or person is accused of conducting the hacking. Whether it's true or not, the press reporting is all around Russia. Do you agree? Yes, I guess that's true. Yes. And on August 5th, 2016, you wrote a column for Breitbart entitled Dear Hillary, DNC Hack Solved, Stop Blaming Russia. Is that right? Yes. When did you first become aware of the online persona Gooch for 2.0? At the time I wrote that piece, only because Gooch for 2.0 actively predicted and took credit for the hack in the material that was subsequently published by WikiLeaks. That, to me, gave some credibility to his claim. And we agree that your Twitter persona, Roger J. Stone Jr., that's you. You're your own man. You write those tweets. You do the retweets. Took me a very long time to get verified, but yes. Congratulations. It's not easy. It took me a while too. Were you aware when you wrote that article, the Breitbart one, that Goose for 2.0 was assessed by the intelligence community as a cutout for the Russian intelligence services? I was aware of that claim, but I don't subscribe to it. There's a substantial amount of information you can find online that questions that. I realize it's an assertion, but as I said in my statement, our intelligence agencies are often wrong. And in your career, in retrospect, I'm not sure that he hacked at the time. I believed he did hack the DNC. Today, given the VIPS report, the piece in the Nation, I'm not sure that that's correct, but I did believe it at the time. You're somebody who has done a lot of business, not just with US citizens, but also, as you said, with foreigners. Actually, that's not true. I think, well, Ukrainians, you've worked with Ukrainians. I did one election cycle in Ukraine. And I'm assuming those Ukrainians spoke English, or at least broken English. They spoke English. And when they communicate with you in broken English, there's a difference between the English that you and I would communicate with each other and a non-native English speaker trying to speak English, talking to an English speaker. Would you agree, right? You would agree, right? It would depend on the individual. Some of them spoke perfect English as well as you and I, or maybe even better. In other cases, people's English was not so good. Did you ever considering the exchange that you had with Gooch for 2.0 and the back and forth, the typos and Gooch for 2.0's writings? It kind of reads like a foreigner is writing it, right? Mr. Stone. The VIPS report believed it had been pasted to Russian, not format, but I'm sorry, I'm not coming up with the right technical word. I understand. What did you believe? I didn't believe anything one way or the other. Did you ever give any thought that this person might be a foreigner? I'm not even sure that this person exists. I'm not even sure it's one person. We don't know that. It is, after all, Twitter, so many times the people on Twitter aren't who they say they are. And you've never reported your interactions with Gooch for 2.0 to any US law enforcement officials? Well, let's be clear the time frame. I write the Breitbart piece on August 5th. This is page 31, by the way. My exchange with Guccifer begins on August 15th and goes through, I think, September 9th. But the publication of the Dnc Documents had been in late July. So I believe on the basis of the content, the context, and the timing of that exchange, it's benign, it's innocuous. I've turned it over to the committee. He offers to help me in several ways. I ignore that. He sends me some voter targeting thing that I took a glance at and thought was worthless. I did nothing with. So, did you think it was unusual that somebody who is clearly involved in a hack of emails was also talking specifically about how you would communicate with voters? Recognize the context for the beginning of our exchange. I had read online that he had been suspended at Twitter. I don't believe in censorship by anybody. I don't care whether you're right, left, center, you should have a right to speak in the marketplace. And therefore, I tweeted in opposition to his suspension. Have you deleted any tweets? I'm talking public tweets with respect to what you were saying about Guccifer WikiLeaks. No. In that summer? No. So you never posted something and then immediately deleted it or deleted it sometime after? I don't recall doing that. I don't believe so. And you're aware that with direct messaging that you're also able to send a message to person A or person B, and then you can go back and delete those messages, those communications? I was not aware of that, but I've never done that. So have you never deleted a direct message that you have sent? Not that I ever recall. I didn't know that you could do that. Dave Chappelle was right. What? 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 Didn't know you couldn't do that. So, how many people other than Gucci for 2.0 have you direct messaged on Twitter? I have no way of knowing. I have 250,000 followers. That's a lot. Anyone of whom can send you a direct message. But you don't write back at all to them, right? To all of them, right? I try to. It's difficult. On August 13th, 2016, you replied to a tweet from WikiLeaks about Twitter suspending Gooch for two, writing, outrageous. Clinton needs to now NNED to censor their critics to rig the upcoming election. Is that right? That is correct. Mr. Swalwell, sorry. And on August 14th, 2016, you tweeted from at Roger Stone Jr. First, hashtag Milo, now Gooch for 2.0. Why are you exposing the truth? Banned? Real Alex Jones at InfoWars, hashtag Free Milo. Is that correct? Correct. I do not believe in censorship of anybody. And on August 14th, 2016, once Gooch for 2.0's account had been reinstated, you sent that account a private message stating, delighted you're reinstated, fuck the state and their MSM lackeys. Is that right? Oh, this transcript was wrong. That was a question from Swallowell. And on August 14th, 2016, once Gooch for 2.0's account had been reinstated, you sent that account a private message stating, delighted you're reinstated, fuck the state and their MSM lackeys. Is that right? Correct. And MSM is mainstream media? That is correct. And on August 15th, 2016, Gooch for Two responds to your private message with a private response, quote, wow, thank you for writing back and thank you for an article about me. Multiple exclamation points. Do you find anything interesting in the docs I posted? Is that right? That is correct. And on August 16th, notice that I ignored that question. A day later, you write an op-ed for The Hill entitled, Can the 2016 election be rigged? You bet. And you tweeted that article from your Twitter account. Is that right? That is correct. And that same day, August 16th, you privately messaged Goochford 2.0 on Twitter, referencing your Hill column and asking Goochford to retweet. You write, Pullsvert. Is that right? Yes, I sent that to dozens of people. So you on Twitter, because I was seeking to get as much exposure for the article as possible, because Many of my interviews he has given, he has a large, sorry, because of the many media interviews he has given, he has a large following on Twitter. And it looks like he or they, at this point, you have pretty sophisticated understanding of Twitter. You're using hashtags and you're saying RT instead of retweet. You understand how Twitter works and what the shorthand is. I'm getting better at it, yes. Okay, so it's also clear that you're asking Guccifer to do something for you, to retweet. Is that right? I sent the retweet request to dozens of people. He was just among them. And you knew that Guccifer was working to undermine Secretary Clinton's campaign. Let's see, it's August 16th. I had written my piece on August 5th. I believe that he is responsible for the hack. I also believe that the material that has come to light is all authentic and accurate. Sure, but it's also undermining of Secretary Clinton's campaign. We can at least agree on that. I would say yes. And you two now have, on August 16th, established a working relationship and that you have asked him to do something and he does it. Is that right? Or she does it? He or she? I think that might be a bit of an overstatement, but we have an innocuous exchange. He retweets something that I suggested he retweet, which I do solely because he has a large following and I'm interested in the maximum number of readers. And he writes back, done. And I read, he'd been hacked. Is that right? That is correct. And then he writes on August 17th, your original tweet, the Hill at Roger Stone Jr. paying you back. Is that right? Yes. Then he sent you 3 private messages that day, first saying, I'm pleased to say you're a great man. Then, and I think I'm going to read your books. And then finally, please tell me if I can help you anyhow. It would be a great pleasure to me. Is that right? That is correct. You'll note that I ignore that request. And then it's about 3+ weeks later on September 9th when he privately messages you what you referred to earlier, those helloflaw.com websites about Democratic voter turnout. Is that right? That is correct. Every one of these tweets that I referenced, you wrote yourself? Yes, my response to the targeting thing that he sends is pretty standard. And at this time, you're also, as he mentioned earlier, still in routine contact with Donald Trump. I am, but I forward that information to no one because I don't find it all that impressive or interesting. Did you tell anyone in the world about your interaction with Guccifer 2.0 before it became public? I did not. Why not? On what basis? He's talked to dozens of journalists. I'm writing a weekly column. I have a syndicated radio show. I'm writing for InfoWars at that point. I'm talking to as many sources as I can. I just consider him to be a source. Have you ever excuse me? Have you ever had your emails hacked? Yes. Would you agree that it's an unpleasant experience? It most certainly is. In my case, someone was able to access my bank account and remove about $15,000, so it was a major pain in the neck. It also made it, I lost my entire contact list, the people that I regularly communicated with. I had to reconstruct that. You've also never met John Podesta, is that right? I don't believe I have, no. And earlier, as we said, you have retweeted a lot in the last couple years. Yes, I like Twitter. And you would agree that you've sent over 30,000 tweets? I have no idea how many tweets I've sent. And that you have actually more than you thought, 269 thousand followers as we sit here today. Well, I think maybe it's increased in recent days. Okay. And during the campaign, 2015, 2016, you were tweeting mostly about your support for Donald Trump. Is that right? I'm a political commentator. That's what I do. Yes. And your opposition to Hillary Clinton. That is also accurate. We're on page 37. And it wasn't just Hillary Clinton. You would also reference other individuals in the Clinton team, like former President Bill Clinton. You've tweeted about him, Mr. Stone. I'm sorry, That would be fair to say. You've also, I have written a book about the Clintons. I'm certainly a critic of theirs. But as far as your tweeting, you not only tweeted about Hillary, you also tweeted about former President Bill and then President Barack Obama. Peace be upon him. Yes. And you would agree that prior to August 21st and the thousands of tweets that you had posted, you had never actually tweeted a single thing about John Podesta. Correct. On August 21st, 2016, you tweeted, "Trust me, it'll soon be the Podesta's time in the barrel. Hashtag crooked Hillary." Is that right? Sounds right. And in the barrel is a colloquialism for an unpleasant experience. Is that right? For under public scrutiny. At least that's the way I meant it. Or would you also agree it is an unpleasant experience to be in the barrel? What barrels has Swallowwell been in? Again, let's put this in context. Mr. Manafort had just resigned over his business dealings in Eastern Europe. I thought it manifestly unfair that Mr. Podesta had not been held to the same standard. Remember that, Tony. I had read the Panama Papers published in January of 2016. I had gotten an opposition research briefing from Dr. Jerry Corsi on the extent of Mr. Podesta's business dealings in Russia. I asked him to memorialize that for me in a memo, which he did on August 31st. My reference to those business dealings, which did in fact come to public scrutiny, covered by the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and many others. And I understand that, but again, you're a prolific and ferocious Twitter. You don't limit yourself to 150 characters, you bastard. You'll tweet on top of tweets if you have to. Rarely, and you had the opportunity to put that tweet in context and you didn't. Is that right? I don't think I had an obligation to. But you didn't, right? What I said was accurate and true, and I just told you what it was based on. And Mr. Stone, one of your rules, a self-professed Stone rule, is admit nothing, deny everything, launch counterattacks. Is that right? That is correct. You'll be able to read the whole book in late October. Another rule is attack, attack, attack. Never defend. Is that right? That is also correct. And Julius Thon is your hero. Is that right? I think he is a hero. I think he is a journalist. And Julian Assange is your hero. It's too much at the moment. I recall that he released information embarrassing the Bush administration, the Obama administration. I don't think he's a partisan. I think he's an opponent of the deep state. Thank you. I'm going to yield back to Mr. Schiff, and I'll yield to Mr. Quigley. And I think I'll end part one there. Wasn't that exciting? Anyway, bye, kids. Bye. You have a wonderful evening. Oh my God. If you like this and you want more amazing Swallowwell impressions, just find them for me. It'll be great. So anyway, time to end this.